Welcome to RotoWire Fantasy Football Live, coming at you 5 days a week, 11 a.m. Eastern. But hey, if you miss the live show, you can always catch the replay. We are off on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Got you through the weekend. Start, sit, show every Sunday. We are getting close to the fantasy playoffs. Anthony Cervino will be in soon. Go over some of the takeaways, reactions from the great Week 13 action. I normally would start out with the biggest game of the week, which is Eagles 49ers. I want to wait for Anthony to come in. I think we got to get a good tag team effort on that one and have a good discussion there. So I'm going to start out today. Look, many people jockeying for playoff positions, fighting for their playoff lives. So we had 6 teams on bye, a number of injured players. Everybody was scraping to get players in lineups. Let's talk about first the week winners, the players that had the great weeks. Deebo Samuel, he only had 7 touches in this game. 3 of them were touchdowns, 138 yards. And we'll talk about the 49ers game in detail later. But what I'll say about Deebo is this. It's for him. It's for Ayuk. It's for Kittle. Basically, you start them every week. You're not going to have explosion games every week, but you have to live with the down games because you have no idea how Kyle Shanahan is going to scheme the game up and who he's going to pick on. Now, again, I'm going to save this up for the Eagles 49ers game, but that's the thing with Deebo. 7 touches, you can get this. Now, there could be other games you get 7 touches, it comes out to 45 yards, and you're done. But again, you drafted the 49ers players knowing there would be volatility. I get George Kittle questions every week on the start sit. Basically, I go, his sad situation hasn't changed. Now, if you drafted him and the situation changed, but this is what you knew you were getting into. So Deebo Samuel, huge, huge week. But really, just about equal to that week, I'm going to go to Thursday, DK Metcalf. Now, what I like about DK Metcalf, and I hadn't thought about this, and I should have identified this pregame with Dallas and Seattle. Dallas plays about 45% man. It's them, the Patriots, and the Browns, the highest level of man defense in the league. And DK Metcalf, if you don't have an elite corner on him and you're playing man that heavy, he's got the physical tools to beat you. Now, he doesn't always beat you because the quarterback doesn't necessarily always get him the ball, but this was that perfect storm. DK against a lot of man coverage, just winning. 6 catches, half of those go for touchdowns. So almost like Deebo, right? Deebo had 7, right? 134 yards. So big game for DK Metcalf, but he was an early week winner, put people in the driver's seat. So beautiful there. Nico Collins. So we'll talk about Tank Dell later, and I just very, very depressing news on that. But Nico Collins started out the season really strong. Then he had a little spell where he was down a bit. He's been firing back the last few weeks, but this game, 191 yards, 12 targets. And it was a game where CJ Stroud didn't go bananas. But yes, if you had Nico Collins in the lineup, wheels up. And my guess is, again, remember, it's the Bobby Slowick offense. Get him schemed into space. So it's not always like, you have to worry, oh my God, you get locked down by somebody. They get him open. And I said that the Broncos play like most teams, majority of zone coverage. So I didn't think it'd be like press man coverage with Patrick Surtain. Collins would have his opportunities even if that happened. But we saw it when everybody was out. Noah Brown didn't catch a thing. Dalton Schultz was out. It was all the Nico Collins show. And you know what? Despite the rough patch in the middle of the season, health permitting, this guy is a superstar. We liked him all 3 years, but it's just the injuries and the quarterback play really held him back. But now we see the real deal. Sam Laporta, the next week winner. So we knew the middle of the field was the place where you attack the Saints. And I thought Amon-Ra St. Brown would be the heavy recipient. He only caught a couple passes. Now, one was a longer touchdown catch and run. Laporta did the damage, caught all 9 targets for $140 and a touchdown. So Sam Laporta was the tight end week winner. And of course, the cheetah, Tyreek Hill. And funny thing with Hill, he often plays 50, 60% of the snaps. He's not on the field a lot. Doesn't matter. He probably sails over 2,000 yards. I mean, just think how rare that is. And with the snap share, I mean, literally, if this cat played every snap, what would we be looking at? And we knew the matchup with Washington was great. I know on the DFS show I said, use Tua and Tyreek. But that said, 23 and 12, 35 DraftKings points for the 9,200 you paid. It wasn't quite 4x, but it certainly got you a high point total. Alvin Kamara, we loved him in this game. We thought that he could see one of those massive target games. Well, he only saw 8. But for him, right, eight's great for any human being. But Alvin Kamara's had like games with 14. But he got it done on the ground. He punches in a couple of touchdowns. Now the second one we lucked out if you had Kamara, because Taysom Hill had a goal line run on the play prior, got stopped an inch or two short, and then they brought Kamara in who punched it in. Hill did take another goal line touchdown away, but again, Kamara goes over 100 scrimmage yards against Detroit, punches in a couple touchdowns. He, based on volume and his work in the passing game and the lack of running back options this year, he's legitimately right now a top 7 running back, and he's nowhere near the player he was 3 years ago. It doesn't matter. Role in the offense. I say this every week. Volume is king in fantasy football, especially that dual threat. Brock Purdy, 4 touchdowns and 314 yards, and they mostly took their foot off the gas in the fourth quarter. Now, I know he had the long catch and run at the end of the third, so there was that. Chad, never stake your reputation on Tim Boyle. Funny with that, basically Rodgers brings his buddies wherever he goes, and I think that Boyle figured out a way to become his buddy, and it got him a couple of starts, and probably won't be many more to follow in that one. My goodness. They could have had Joe Flacco. They could have had Joe. He was in their building last year. They could have had Joe Flacco. If they had Joe Flacco, look, I know Joe Flacco is, but the Jets would be competing for a playoff spot if they had Joe Flacco. I don't know. All right, Brock Purdy, though. Is he a real-life MVP? No. Is he going to win the MVP? If the 49ers, they have the tiebreaker on the Eagles, they're a game back. If they win the conference, I think Brock Purdy is going to be the MVP because it's a quarterback-driven award, and it doesn't really account for circumstances. Now, Purdy's earlier season numbers weren't gaudy, but when it counts, he's putting up the big numbers. 3 of the last 4 weeks, 3 touchdowns or more. Shredding the Eagles in a big game, that's gonna be a lot of style points. A lot, obviously, Shanahan system. It's maybe, arguably, the best set of weapons collected on an offense? Maybe. Is it hyperbole? Maybe it is. You got Christian McCaffrey, of course, and you got Kittle, and then you got Debo and Ayuk. And I know we've seen better technical wide receiver duos, Randy Moss and Chris Carter. But, I mean, you throw George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey in the mix. That 4-man grouping. Now, we could go back probably to the years before the salary cap and find something like that. But again, Purdy's probably, on a track to MVP if they win the 1 seed. Christian Watson, but he did grab his hamstring late in this game. So right now, Christian Watson has been turning it around. I give Matt LaFleur a ton of credit. Matt LaFleur really learned. He's a great coach. He saw the inefficiencies in Jordan Love's game, and he has crafted plans to get the ball to the receivers in Jordan Love's comfort level. He's really bridged a gap. Jordan Love is the same quarterback in some ways he was, but the success rate is going through the roof. And we saw early in the season, LaFleur set him up for success, but the defense is kind of already seen film on him. They kind of knew his deficiencies. But right now, I mean, certainly LaFleur's not Shanahan, but LaFleur is an amazing coach in terms of getting receivers schemed up. And so maybe now he's got the chemistry figured out with Watson and his quarterback, Jordan Love. But now let's see what Watson's hamstring injury is. He did grab it. He went to the ground, stayed down for a few moments. That'll be interesting because speed receivers and hamstring injuries could be problematic. Mike Evans. Oh, my goodness. Mike Evans continues to see heavy target volume from Baker Mayfield. Chris Godwin is basically being ignored, which is fine. Love Chris Godwin. But, I mean, Mike Evans is a beast. He's over 30 years old now. He is 30. And, again, 162 yards and a touchdown. Another week winner, Mike Evans, to lesser degree than the other ones. And Michael Pittman. Catches an overtime touchdown to go over 100 yards and a touchdown. But again, 16 targets. He and Evans just gobbling up targets. Pittman's level of targets is just borderline crazy. But again, betting the over prop on his yardage, that was a winning bet against Tennessee, and they just kept feeding him the ball. Now, I'm talking about the week winners here, but real quick off the side, Josh Downs, I liked Josh Downs yesterday because I said, look, Tennessee, they have safety issues. They'll hit one or two big plays, right? Well, guess who hit the big plays? Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce gets the 100 yards coming out of kind of nowhere. I kind of assumed that Josh Downs would be the guy beating him for the long plays. Back to Watson. Chad, I checked the news before I got on the show. I didn't see any update on Watson. Probably still a little early because that's not massive one. If it was like something that was like Kenny Pickett's, like those kind of get released quick. The other ones we might not hear about that for another hour or two. And that might even be a Wednesday one if they keep it quiet. They don't have to talk to the media. A couple more quick week winner types. They were getting to the lower chain is James Conner. And look, I couldn't recommend to start him. Albert, good morning. Everybody knows I love James Conner. He's my dude. But it hasn't worked out this year. The yards per carry are great. He's a great running back. But the receiving usage hasn't been useful at all. They haven't gotten him into space at all. The goal line, it was Kyler Murray stealing carries. It was really hard to go with the narrative. He was going back to Pittsburgh, not just playing for Pittsburgh, but he went to school there as well. So it was a big homecoming for him. And he started out slow. Pittsburgh was ganging up on him. They had those 2 weather delays, and it was like he just took over between those 2 different delays. He gets a touchdown between the first and the second delay. So now, all right, you're going to have a decent fantasy day. Afterwards, when they were playing with the lead, Connor put the foot to the floor, goes over 100 yards, gets a second touchdown. And I think it's possible Kyler Murray wasn't going to steal the touchdowns from Connor, because I really do think in retrospect, that was a thing. It was a big deal for Connor to come home. And I do think that they wanted to make sure that when they're at the goal line, he was getting those touchdowns, but you can't predict those. You know, a lot of times we have these narratives and we just can't quantify them. So I had a line where I had to start Connor, but other people gave me other good options. And because we just haven't seen it, I had to default to the others. Derrick Henry, last 2 home games, despite the bad blocking on the offensive line, he's looked great. He's looked great all year. The bad blockings hurt him. In road games, they've been worse off. Indianapolis still without Grover Stewart, and they got gashed by Tyjae Spears too. So Indy, remember this, people are going to target Indy's run defense, but just remember, when we see Grover Stewart back, changes the entire face of the run defense. Teams can no longer overcommit to DeForest Buckner. The 2 tackles with the damage they do, it allows the linebackers to free up. So it's a big thing. Charlene, 11-2. Oh, he lost Hank Dell. Yeah, we're going to talk about him in a bit. And then Chad, the delay to limit the big plays to prevent injury and lean on Connor. Yeah, because Connor had a high, one of his highest snap shares in a while. I think it was 74%. So there was that. Interesting. Devon Achane. So I told people, I go, look, if you're going to start him, the only thing I'm worried about is the last time he came back from his injury, he didn't finish the game. And it's like, if you're confident he'll play and make it through, start him. But I go, if you have other great options, I almost want to wait a week to see if he makes it through a game, because I don't know what this knee issue is. Poured it on in the second half, just fine. Another 100 total yards. He outsnapped Mostert significantly. Basically, it was like a 62-38 split. The carries were closer than that, of course. But H had 17 carries, 3 catches, a couple more touchdowns. So now we know he's healthy. We've seen his speed against different opponents. I think you start him as a top 15 running back, but his upside is through the roof, because we've seen what his speed can do to defenses. It's real speed. I mean, and then the last one, Chuba Hubbard goes for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns against Tampa. No catches. Who cares? He got you 22 fantasy points. So everybody's good with that. But Chuba Hubbard, again, on and off. Don't count it every week, but we get it. So those are kind of the weak ones, the dream crushers. And this is even before the injuries we'll get into. Terry McLaurin, shut out on 3 targets. I didn't recommend him in fantasy lineups. I told people they're playing Miami. Fangio's defense was going to make it tough to get downfield. I didn't see a 0 coming. Nobody saw 0 coming. So again, Miami is going to get better and better each week. Even though they lost Jalen Phillips to the Achilles injury, this defense is for real. And with Ramsey in there, he gets healthier and back to full speed every week. This defense is for real. And that coaching of Fangio has always been a game changer. Austin Eckler, wow. I knew the matchup was tough playing New England. And I had start-sit questions with him. And I remember one specific person, I told him, I go, I don't recommend starting Eckler. But if you can't live with Eckler on your bench, if he happens to go off, then you play him. But based on the lineup choices that the person gave me, I was like, Eckler is the third option. He's not the one to start here. 14 carries for 18 yards, 2 catches for 9 yards. Now, we knew Belichick's game plan was not a difficult one. Keenan Allen is short and intermediate receiver. Austin Eckler, the running back, compress everything up. If Herbert beats you deep, he beats you deep. Jalen Guyton, Quentin Johnson, who had a big drop again. It just go ahead, and it worked. Now, Eckler, I don't know if it's the ankle. I don't know if it's the age. I don't know if it's a combination. I don't know if it's the offense doesn't have the weapons to stretch the field. It's probably a bunch of things. But Austin Eckler's in trouble right now. It's late in the season, but I seriously had to move him down on my rankings. It's just, it's not going on right now. Now, could he score 3 touchdowns next week? Sure, he's Austin Eckler. But right now, he doesn't look like the same guy. So right now, RB2, volume-based, because he did get 16 touches. Didn't do much with them. So there's that. Not looking good. DeAndre Swift, he got dinged up late in this game, took a really big hit, but the die was already cast. 6 carries for 13 yards. He hasn't been a factor in the passing game here. 2 catches for 7 yards. And we knew in Detroit, that was a big staple of his game. But that's not been a factor here. And we knew we don't get the big yardage games. I mean, that 175 against Minnesota, like week 2 or 3. But normally we get 60-ish yards. This wasn't close. And 49ers, talk about the game when Anthony comes in, just legit. And Swift lacks vision. He's an excellent talent, but he really lacks vision. And so those plays where you have to create, not so much a creator. And so basically, he could give you speed on top of what's blocked. But outside of that, when he faces a complicated, good defense, volume's not his friend. Ramondre Stevenson, tough injury. He was on his way to a great game. 9 for 39 early. We loved him this week. He had 100 scrimmage yards in 3 straight games. Quickly ruled out Thursday night game. He ain't playing Thursday. Charlene loves Purdy, no doubt. And anyway, Anthony Cervino's in the house. Man, I was just saying, Ramondre was on his way to another good game. He had 300-yard scrimmage games in a row. He had a very good matchup with the Chargers, had 9 for 39. And then he hurts the ankle, quickly ruled out. They got a Thursday game. We ain't going to see him there. Probably not going to see him in the game after. When you ruled out that quickly, it's probably a high ankle. Thoughts?
Thoughts on Ramondre Stevenson or the fallout? Because, Ram was starting to get going, but like Ezekiel Elliott, right? Like, and you know me, I'm a Cowboys fan. I think Zeke has some more gas left than people on Twitter, than the national media, than anybody thought, because he does look pretty explosive in quite a few games this year. So if Ezekiel, I doubt he's available, but if he's available on waivers, you need to pick him up. And I think he's going to be a quality starter if you're in running back trouble or in flex trouble in fantasy. The schedule for Zeke, playoff schedule, weeks 14 to 17, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Denver, Buffalo. You can run on every one of those teams.
Wow. It's a great schedule. And Anthony, I was pointing out on my Saturday XM show that before this game, early in the season, the New England run blocking was horrible. They had injuries. Yeah. They also just did not block well. Like many Bill Belichick teams, some of the infrastructure gets better as the season goes on. That run blocking now is an asset. They run blocking. They can't pass block to save their lives. They get their quarterback killed, but they can run block. And so Stevenson had seen the benefit the last 3 games like you're saying, I think Ezekiel Elliott will see that same benefit, and they have no choice but to involve the running back, because how do you trust Bailey Zappi?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't trust Mac Jones, Malik Washington, Bailey Zappi. The passing attack's a mess in New England. Like, if they have any hope on staying in games, it's defense and it's the running game, and it's really bad. You said it a couple of weeks ago. It seems like the offense overall in the NFL took a step back to 2012, and this Chargers Patriots game, that was a big showing of it.
All right. So again, with Zeke, volumes king in fantasy football. One thing I will say definitely for sure with Anthony is Elliott's been lightly used this year. And there's the fresher legs thing. The whole NFL is ground down at this point. It's been 13 weeks of attrition. And sometimes the player who might not be what he was, but if he has fresh legs, we could see that minimized his what he looked like. And Anthony said he looked a little more explosive because he's seeing less work, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very useful thing, because when you're not taking the pounding, like we said, it pays off. So anyway, yeah, I love the observation. All right, I want to talk 49ers and Eagles. Anthony, the Eagles came out red hot on defense. They came out fast and aggressive. They held the 49ers to -6 yards in the first quarter. And then Kyle Shanahan said, okay, I see what you're doing. You're screwed now, because now I know what you're doing, and I am just going to put your linebackers into a blender, and I'm going to make them pay because they can't do their job. The pass rush will start getting there, but I'm going to have these plays set before they engage. And we saw desolation. We saw 14 points in the second, 14 in the third, 14 in the fourth. With the 49ers healthy on offense, can they be stopped?
No. And I'll just put it right just like that. If there was anybody who could potentially have held, Dallas couldn't. I thought they could. And now Philly, I get their secondary is bad, but their defense can still show. They can't. They got blown out, I think, worse than Dallas. So,
yes,
the worst we've seen out of the 49ers, and I have said this on this show, I've said this on my show, I get Brock Purdy's key. I think the bigger key to this offense is Trent Williams. They need Trent Williams healthy. Because when Trent Williams was hurt, it was Debo and Trent for that 3-game stretch that they lost consecutively. Trent Williams is the backbone of this offense, because 100%. He protects the quarterback. And I do worry still about Brock Purdy with pressure in his face, which we saw when Trent Williams was out. So Trent Williams is to me the key to that Super Bowl, not Brock Purdy.
Right. And what the other thing Trent Williams allows is the rest of the line isn't good. But what you can do is you can bring an extra tight end in. You can shift protections. You could do a lot with your other players. It's almost like when you have that shutdown corner like Deion Sanders back in the day. All right, you got this. We just need everybody else now to take care of everything else, and we can put less on their plate. And that's Trent Williams. Not only, as you're saying, one of the best tackles we'll ever see, but he's so good that everybody else they can help others. He doesn't need an ounce of help. So, yes, I'm with you on that. Right now, this offense stays healthy, and I've said this when they were hurt. Like you just talked about, there's a stars and scrubs roster. They need their stars, but if they're there, I do not see with Kyle Shanahan too. We can't undersell that. And like I said, the way he counterpunched quickly, that's the beauty of Shanahan. He lets you come out and do what you're going to do, and then he's okay, I know how to attack you. And Philly was done. It looked like that Rocky III Clubber Lang fight. Clubber Lang comes in with a quick knockout, and then all of a sudden Rocky's like, all right, I got you. Then Rocky beats him to a pulp. And the good Rocky analogy with Philly right now. Philly, we've talked about this all year, Anthony. They're putting up points. They're winning games. That's what you're supposed to do. You're in the NFL, and that they've been great. But we've seen that the offense was not a smooth running machine. They ran into an elite defense here. And since they added Chase Young and Randy Gregory for depth, and they have Hargrave, and they have Bosa, and they have Eric Armstead, those combination of linemen put so much stress on the offensive line. The linebackers are freed up to do more. The corners don't have to cover as long. And Philly puts up 19 points. And of course, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, they get their numbers. There was no Dallas Goedert here, and certainly that's a benefit to the defense. DeAndre Swift had nowhere to go. 6 for 13. Got dinged up late. Eagles play the Cowboys next. What do you make of the Eagles now? They still have the lead in the NFC. 49ers, if they catch them at the tiebreaker. Thoughts?
Philly, until Dallas beats them, until other teams beat them outside of the Jets, they're still the team to beat in the NFC outside of the 49ers. I think these two teams are in a tier with themselves. Now, Dallas can get into that tier with Philly by beating them at home, which normally Dallas does. But I still think this is a very dangerous Philadelphia Eagles team. Nobody, when this whole team in San Francisco has been healthy, as we know, has been able to keep up with this 49ers team. So, like, you have to put them in a tier up with themselves, even with the AFC. I don't think anybody touches the 49ers. They're the 49ers. They're the best team in the NFL. I still think Philly's Philly. They're still going to be a really tough out, and Dallas is going to have to bring their A game.
100%. And, you brought up the AFC. Look, AFC is not scaring me right now.
No.
Miami's got a shot to do some things, but they haven't beaten anybody. And offensively, there are things that you could do against them. But anyway, in the defense, again, I love Fangio's defense. But again, I just it's the NFC right now to me. It's AFC is, as years in past, it's been all AFC. Oh, it changes in the NFL, Anthony, very fast, right?
Yeah, I mean, even going into this year, the AFC still looked like the dominant conference, and the teams like Buffalo, they fell apart. I think people oversell the Chargers because of Justin Herbert. They obviously, it just seems like, I don't know what the hell's going on there. Maybe age is catching up, especially with Eckler and Keenan Allen and all the fumbles. I think a lot of it's the head coach, but they've fallen back. So a lot of these teams that we thought were going to be really good are not that good. Right. And we're starting to see a shift now in the NFC with, hey, like Detroit's for real. You got Philly, Dallas, San Francisco. That's 4 teams right there. And then there's a couple sleeper teams in the NFC too are getting like the Rams are starting to come alive right now. I think Stafford, 7 touchdown passes in the past 2 games. And I don't think Cooper Kupp's fully healthy. Nakuma's a little bit banged up. And I'm missing a team in the NFC that's starting to play well. Green Bay.
Green Bay's playing.
I don't know if they're for real,
right?
But the past year to beat Detroit and Kansas City in consecutive weeks, that's nothing. We got to pay attention to that. They're almost like Denver. They remind me of Denver in the AFC.
That's a good comp. Now it's funny because it's when you look backwards. Now Green Bay, like I said, they had that big win against Detroit, but the last 3 weeks, Detroit looked bad against the Bears. After getting a 21-0 lead against the Saints, they didn't look good. They almost coughed that game away. And then the Chiefs, we look back, the Lions played them in week 1. And, oh, my God, they beat the Chiefs. Chiefs don't impress me. Sorry, they don't impress. So it's interesting. But yes, the Packers for right now, they are a team to watch. Charlene pointed out Elijah Moore, 12 targets, Amari Cooper, 5. That would have been the opposite. Cooper got a concussion in the first half. Yeah. Cooper was the man. It was 3 for 32 early. It was like be the Cooper show. And the poor dude, man, he just can't catch a break this year. He banged up his ribs last week, got a concussion this week. Cooper would have gone off in that game. Cooper would have been over 100 yards. He would have probably ended up with a touchdown. Moore does okay with his targets. But like I said, I know Alan Soslowski had talked up Moore, and I said, no, Cooper's the guy. But those who played more benefited from the injury and it wasn't David Njoku. Harrison Bryant. I don't want to spend much time with 5 targets, 40-something yards, and a touchdown. Didn't see that coming, but that's probably enough Cleveland talk right now, right? All right, so, Anthony, next game. Houston. They pull off the win. It's a character win. And they didn't play their best football. They lose Tank Dell for the season. We'll talk about that in a minute. Noah Brown, who had been supernova hot, missed some games in the knee, comes back. Bad drop, 2 targets, no catches. They were without their tight end, Dalton Schultz. Nico Collins was the only non-quarterback who did anything. John Mechie had 9 yards. That's the only other receiver who had yardage. Tight end, Brevin Jordan did have 64 yards, 3 catches. Running backs, we thought it was the Singletary show. He had 82% of the snaps last week, right? Nope. Pierce gets 15 carries. Singletary gets 8. Singletary was a recommended start this week because it had 82% snap share last week.
Earn me.
Done. Yes, I recommended it to people because it was like he was playing better. It seems like he had distanced himself. Last week, it looked like when both were on the field, even though Pierce got work. Overall, though, let's talk about Tank Dell. That loss, how does that impact this team long term?
I mean, Tank Dell has been so reliable and productive. This is going to be a big loss for them. But I still think, like, CJ Stroud, we've seen him, and this is what makes CJ Stroud, I think, different than a lot of rookies we've seen in the past, is that he elevates guys like Noah Brown. He's elevated, Dalton Schultz was a good tight end, but we're starting to see Dalton Schultz, when he's healthy at least, numbers back with Dak. So, like, as big of a loss as Tank Dell will be, I think he'll elevate the next guy up. I mean, Nico Collins, 9 for $191 and 1. This is Nico Collins. Yes, he's breaking out this year, but that's like Justin Jefferson's stat line. That's a good secondary. I believe Surtain got a little bit banged up, but it's still a very good secondary that's been playing better that CJ Stroud matters 274 on.
The Denver defense, they have been very, very solid, and they almost got their turnover late. They caused the fumble, and the Texans were able to recover it, and that was the whole thing. And but anyway, again, a character win because their defense had to come through. Denver had the ball deep in the red zone late in the game. They scored a touchdown. They win. So hats off to the Texans because they continue to get it done. Nico Collins going forward, what level of confidence do you have in him? I honestly believe he is a top 15 receiver, and at PPR, he might be doing a little better than that.
Yeah, I mean, Nico right now, he's been overshadowed by Tank Dell, but I still like to think Nico is the number one wide receiver there, even with Tank Dell healthy and active. So yeah, he's got to be a locked and loaded guy. Like, I'll put this, like, there's guys like Nico, Adam Thielen. Like, Nico's been solid and consistent for the better part of this season, where somebody like Adam Thielen, big first half, he's been non-existent in the second half. But like Nico Collins, outside of a couple of games, he's given you double-digit PPR points, a high floor with the capability of blowing up in the right matchup.
100%. So all that said, the Denver side of the ball. So Denver, we know the formula. And Sean Payton, he's doing what he can. Offensively, they run as much as they can. They pass when they have to. And fortunately, Courtland Sutton comes up with big play after big play. Only 2 catches, 77 yards and a touchdown. Russell Wilson, 3 picks. He tries to scramble. He gets some nice yardage for fantasy, but he gets caught from behind an awful lot now. And this offense is on a real fine tightrope. And if they play any of the better defenses and now they understand what this approach is, I think this offense is going to have significant problems. But anyway, thoughts on the Broncos?
The offense hasn't been great. Like, they've been playing good. What's been really helping the Broncos, I think going into yesterday, they were at a plus 14 turnover differential, something crazy.
And that was in 4 weeks.
3 or 4 games. Yeah. So that's obviously, you're going to win a lot of those football games when you're getting that. But then yesterday, you got Russ giving it away 3 times with the 3 interceptions. And so I think they came back down to earth. Houston, to me, is the better team this year. And so, like, Denver, I don't think they're going to make any significant noise. Yeah, they'll be in the wild card hunt, but this is a big win for Houston, because if it comes down to Denver and Houston tiebreaker, Houston's sneaking in. I think Houston's going to be a dangerous team, and they could be a dangerous team. Like, they kind of remind me, they're gritty like Jacksonville last year.
I think that's where the loss of Tank Dell hurts them. Now look, Nico Collins caught 2 50-yard passes yesterday. It's not like he can't get deep, but if you only have to be concerned with him and he's already getting alpha treatment, you lose that threat of Dell. The drop off from Dell to everyone else when they're in the playoffs, that's where it probably manifests. Right now, like you're saying, regular season, I think they're going to be just fine, but that's where it manifests up, because what he's provided to this offense has been a dynamic stretch the field. And that's not the only way he wins. He's won many different ways, but that's the dynamism that they are going to miss. Before we get to the next game, Charlene points out Michael Pittman. Yes, just the targets are through the roof.
Yep.
Almost every week he gets it done. Pittman, if we're drafting for next year, wide receiver 10 ish.
Probably
a year older.
Yeah, he's a top 12 wide receiver. I just don't know where I would put him right now.
Yeah.
Into that 10 to 12 range. What I want to do, I would have to dig into Michael Pittman with Anthony Richardson.
Right. I just this morning. Yes.
Productive early. But like it just doesn't matter. It just seems like the quarterbacks, and maybe it was Frank Reich and the quarterbacks, a combination, whatever it is. This is the Michael Pittman that, fantasy Twitter thought he could be all these years, and he's popped big time, but I don't see that going away. When you're this productive with Gardner Minshew, and then you're going to get Anthony Richardson and that arm back, like this is going to be a really dangerous football player.
Yeah, Anthony, it's funny you mentioned it because I was at the gym this morning. I'm thinking to myself, I've got to go back and just check the splits of how he did with Richardson. I know he was productive, but it's been a while now. But it was funny because we were both kind of thinking alike on that one because that'll be his reality next year. And Anthony says, as a Panthers fan, it was Reich. I love Frank Reich. Hopefully he gets a real place to coach and have an opportunity because I do think he got a raw deal. And a couple other things. Eric Murrow points out that Chuba was on his bench, Zach Moss in the lineup. Moss had 33.5 fantasy points PPR against Tennessee in week 5. And he had been nothing but productive going back to the 4 starts he made at the end of last season.
Yep.
Playing at Tennessee, it's one of those things. I mean, Zach Moss was the free square in fantasy and defense. That's why, honestly, I always think you never play the free square. Let everybody play the free square because if the free square doesn't hit, guess what? You're ahead of X percent of the field. Thoughts on Zach Moss? Will he be fine going forward?
Matt, Cincy, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, who was actually number 1 against the run, and then fantasy championship week 17 against Vegas. I think he's playable. He had 21 touches yesterday. What's concerning, 0 touches, and maybe this isn't updated on RotoWire yet, but in the red zone, I don't see any updates here. But is that right, where he got 0 touches in the red zone?
Well, they didn't get there much. Alex Pierce had the bomb for the touchdown.
True.
They had the overtime bomb that went to the 1-yard line. So maybe, I don't remember. There was a pass to Pittman on that one. Yeah. And then they had the block punt for a touchdown. So and they kicked field goals. And so Charlene's Matt Gay came through with some field goals. But so I think it was one of those games where they didn't run many red zone plays. And I think that was an anomaly because normally he's money in the red zone, right?
Yeah.
So next game, we'll do one more game, and then we will. And Chad points out, assuming Pittman sticks around, considering his contract status. Good point. Indy should have money. You got a rookie quarterback. There should be money. And Irsay, say what you will about him, he'll pay his receivers. He has a history with that one at least. And I don't think to me. It'd be a tiny chance because they'd franchise him otherwise. If he's going to walk, they'd franchise him. So I have to assume anything on that, Anthony?
No, they're going to lock Michael Pittman up. It's hard for me to see Jim Irsay just letting a guy like Pittman go, seeing how productive he's been, because you need to put weapons around Anthony Richardson. You locked up Jonathan Taylor finally, so why not lock up the wide receiver, seeing how this offense has been good? I mean, this borderline playoff team, and nobody had this team close.
No. We were seeing as one of the worst teams in the league, possibly. Well, the big thing was, and I had kind of predicted this, that not enough. I knew the offensive line in my mind would get back this year. I said Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, you just don't go from being a star level player to losing it in 1 year in your 20s. It was just, they had to be hurt. And this year we've seen that's been an anchor to the team. So anyway, all that said, and next one more game before we get into the Monday night preview. Lions Saints. The Lions, of course, some turnovers that helped them early. They jump out to a 21-0 lead. Plenty of time left in the first quarter, and they have that big lead. And there were some people in smaller leagues where they had some big name running backs, and like one of the questions was Montgomery, Gibbs, and there were two other really good running backs. And I told them to sit the two Lions backs. I go, well, they're playing at New Orleans, tough matchup. And in the first quarter, these guys were crushing it. They did nothing the rest of the way. Montgomery, 56 yards and a touchdown, one catch, lost a yard. Gibbs had most of his 60 yards in the first quarter, lost 6 yards on his only catch. So Gibbs ends up with 7 PPR points. Montgomery gets the touchdown, so he goes for 12. So actually ended up working out, fortunately, because I would have felt terrible if they went off. But the whole Lions offense, again, the turnovers helped. Amon-Ra St. Brown, fortunately, catch and run for a long touchdown. 2 catches, 49 yards, 6 targets. The guy who goes off, the tight end, Sam Laporta, which middle of the field was going to be vulnerable against New Orleans. That's why I liked St. Brown, but it was Laporta. Caught all 9 targets for $140 and a touchdown. Goff had his 2 touchdowns early. And again, Jared Goff does not look like the same Jared Goff from the middle of last year till about week 8 of this year. He's looking like the Jared Goff that turned downward in Los Angeles. Thoughts on this offense, Jared Goff, and then the offense?
I mean, Goff played an okay game yesterday compared to the 2 weeks before. But there's something going on in Detroit to how they started. And you mentioned Goff, like Goff was playing better on the road up until a few weeks ago. Maybe this is just a sticking point. Maybe they're trying some different things with the playoffs on the horizon. Like they're trying to get Jameson Williams more involved. They're trying to create a balance between Gibbs and Montgomery, but there's something a little bit off. And this team has to be able to figure it out. Like you shouldn't be able to start the season as dominant as you were and then hit a big speed bump like this. Like the 49ers had that 3-game slide and then they figure it out. They're once again dominant. If Detroit wants to be the real deal, they need to figure it out quick. Because a couple weeks, you got some winnable games, and you got Dallas coming up. And that Dallas game could mean playoff positioning.
Yes. So, look, Ben Johnson's an excellent offensive coordinator. He's done very well to scheme players open for Jared Goff. But I know Nate Tice from The Athletic says, and he probably stole this from somebody else, you got to win with Jimmies and Joes, not X's and O's. He would say that a lot about the Cliff Kingsbury offense. Well, I think at some point, the lack of overwhelming talent, they don't have it on the outside receivers. This is a middle of the field team. This is St. Brown. This is the tight end, Laporta. These are the running backs, Montgomery and Gibbs. If a really good defense plays them, you could dare them to beat you on the outside. If you funnel your resources to the inside, a good, like the 49ers level deal, obviously they're the best, but the other ones that are in that's general range, they're excellent, like the Cowboys. You could take a lot away from this team, and you could really make Jared Goff in a world of hurt. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you broke up there for a little bit.
Oh, I was just saying that they lack great outside weapons.
Okay.
Detroit's a middle of the field team. If they play a great defense in the playoffs, like the Cowboys or the 49ers, all you have to do is just say, Goff, beat us outside, because we don't think you can consistently do that.
Isn't this why you drafted somebody like Jameson Williams to be that outside threat?
Right. And he's a speed guy, which is great, but they don't have an X. They don't have a true winner on the outside, right? They don't have, Nico Collins is the flavor of the day, but there's they don't have that number one guy. St. Brown's a great player. He's a slot receiver. At the end of the day, you could gum up the middle of the field if you have an elite defense. So it's going to be fun to see. The Saints, very quickly on the Saints. Olave gets it done, plays limited snaps, gets 5 catches for $119. He cashes. But pretty much else, it was the Alvin Kamara show. Not great yards per carry, but volume. Over 100 scrimmage yards, a couple touchdowns. Got lucky on the second one because Taysom Hill was stopped like an inch short of the play prior, and then they pulled Hill, and then Kamara got the second one. And, of course, Taysom Hill does his usual damage, 74 yards and a touchdown. Derek Carr, the third time this year, left with head and neck injuries. It's like that was a weird thing. Usually have the concussion. All 3 times, head and neck. Is there a point that's going to shut him down?
You would think, especially with you have a viable backup like Jameson Williams, and Derek Carr has not been very good. He's one of the worst, if not the worst, red zone quarterback in the NFL, which is why we see these running backs and Taysom Hill and the tight ends give so much attention over the wide receivers. I think it's just more of a comfortability factor. And the Saints, they're a borderline playoff team. They're not going to go far, but they can certainly sneak in. I just don't know if they can sneak in with Derek Carr. So, like, you have your out. Like, sometimes you need an out, and sometimes an injury is an out, and you have your out with Derek Carr. And get Jameson Winston in there.
You know, I never thought I would say this. The Raiders were smart for letting go a top 20-ish quarterback. They were so smart. He is what you call a franchise limiter. And that ultimately, like you said, it might get you in, spitting distance of the playoffs. But what are you really getting? You're getting a middling pick every year. You're not going to compete on the big stage at anybody. And there's a lot of teams that are in this quarterback purgatory. You just don't know where to go because the other options are always like horrific. But some point, you just got to lose enough games and hopefully get a draft pick to get a quarterback. But as long as you're just moderately competitive, you set your franchise back sometimes decade plus. Any thoughts?
The Saints, when they brought in Derek Carr, I feel like they believe they were getting something different, getting something better than what they got. They, it's not like they paid him chump change. Like, they gave him a decent amount of money, and they thought Derek Carr was going to be the answer. And I just didn't get it. I don't know what they saw with the Raiders and Derek Carr that the rest of us didn't see.
The Christmas season joke. They had a beautifully wrapped present under the tree, and it was a lump of coal. Not so good. All right. Charlene asked about injury status on Charbonnet. Usually Pete Carroll is the ultimate injury optimist, and he made it sound like Charbonnet is going to miss time. The knee swelled up. He makes it sound like he is going to miss time. Did you interpret anything out of that? Because normally if Carroll says anything negative, it's usually a time thing.
Yeah, I mean, significant swelling in the knee. This is probably going to be a lengthy injury, right? I think you're right. Like, Pete Carroll generally doesn't like to show his hand, and this time he is. The good thing for Seattle, like, can they get Kenneth Walker back on the field?
Supposed to play. Right now he's supposed to play this week.
It's not like they're left with just DJ Dallas now, so they have a good pivot, and I think they'll be fine. But for any fantasy managers possibly thinking, hey, Zach Charbonnet is finally going, I'm going to finally use him. You hit a big roadblock, and he possibly not. This could put him out the rest of the way, depending on how this this knee goes, because what if the swelling goes down and there's more damage, which we've seen before?
Oh, yeah, it's a good call on that, Anthony. Good call. So, yeah, right now, not looking great for Zach Charbonnet. But like you said, for the Seahawks, having Walker, and I'm going to quickly go on this before we get to the game. So when they drafted Charbonnet, and I should have stuck with my gut throughout the summer, my gut was this. Pete Carroll, ultimately, they'll throw, but they want to run the ball and play defense. That's what they'd like to do. And if they get in the playoffs, they want to have that formula available to them. And when they drafted Charbonnet, it was like, okay, they've got Walker, but then they've got DJ Dallas. Everybody else was gone. They had nobody else. And my gut reaction to draft day was they drafted Charbonnet because if Walker is to go down, they've got nobody. You can't run the ball. Yeah. That was my thought. And then as the summer went on and we hear all the rosy talk about Charbonnet, I started thinking to myself, yeah, maybe they're going to split the backfield. Should have gone with my gut reaction on it. What was your thought on the Charbonnet drafting?
I like Charbonnet coming out. I didn't like the landing spot because of Kenneth Walker. Now, their snap count, I get, Walker did miss the game. Their snap count's actually very close, but I think if you pull up the touches, that's where Walker's a little bit more dominant.
Yeah, way disparate.
I viewed Charbonnet as a true handcuff more than any type of a 1B because, like Kenneth Walker last year, he didn't show us any reason why. It's not like a Dameon Pierce situation where, like, Pierce was good at bad. Like, Walker was a really good running back. So, like, when the Texans went out and got Devin Singletary, that kind of told me, okay, at some point, if Pierce struggles, they're going to go to Devin, which we did see with the injury, and even before the injury, Singletary is getting more work. And for this, I saw more. Okay, well, Chris Carson's retired. Homer is in Chicago now. Like Rashad Penny's in Philly. This was a death pick. So
yes,
kind of like what you were thinking.
Yes. And so sometimes the group think in the summer can be dangerous. Sometimes the group is right, but sometimes those first takes we have when we're dialed in, sometimes it's good to stick with those. All right, Monday Night Football. Well, when the schedule maker drew this one up, this was a premier matchup with massive implications for the AFC. Now we got the Bengals, no Joe Burrow. Yeah. They won't be playing football in January other than the scheduled game in Week 18. And the Jaguars, we were hoping to see this massive leap on offense with Trevor Lawrence. Well, we didn't quite see that. Now, Anthony, before we get into this game, I want to point something out. The last 2 weeks, we talked last week a little bit, 2 weeks in a row now, we've seen Calvin Ridley used in bunch formations, in motion, and all of a sudden, and they didn't use him in the first half last week, but second half they did. But their offense looks much better now that they're using him, weaponizing him, and opening up things for other players. My personal belief is Press Taylor is not calling those shots. Doug Peterson, I think, is taking some liberty in fixing the offense. I want you to speak about that before we talk about the game.
Yeah, whatever's going on right now in Jacksonville, it's working. We're starting to see this offense cook. Like Trevor Lawrence, the way he played down the stretch last year, it looked like he took that leap. And okay, well, this upcoming season, meaning this year, this is going to be year 2 in the Doug Peterson system, and we're going to see Trevor Lawrence just be a top 5 quarterback, both in the NFL and fantasy, and it didn't really start out like that. But if you look at the past 2 games, I get 49ers coming off the bye. They just destroy everybody. But then the past 2 is when we see Trevor Lawrence really take that next step. Tennessee, he gets 2 rushing, 2 throwing, almost 300 yards passing. And last week, 364, which I believe is a career high for Lawrence. Gets another rushing touchdown, a throwing. Like this is what I expected from Trevor Lawrence and this offense. I get Tennessee's a little bit rough around the edges, but Houston's a very good football team. They still pulled out the win there.
Absolutely. Now, this week's game. So the Bengals at the Jaguars. Start with the Bengals side of the ball. Bengals, the pass protection's bad. They had invested in the line over the last couple of years. Hasn't really panned out, and now there's no Joe Burrow. Run blocking overall somewhat adequate, not a team strength, not horrific, but Joe Mixon's a compiler. Joe Mixon is not a running back that's making things happen on his own. In this specific matchup against the Jaguars are a little below average against the run. They've been very good in coverage, even when Tyson Campbell has missed games. They're a solid coverage team. The pass rush is really hit or miss, though. Very hit or miss in the past. Some weeks they dial it up, but a lot of weeks they don't show up at all. So on the course of the season, you would say this is not a team that gets consistent pressure at all. Now, the way to attack this defense, the Jaguars, they're very bad against receiving backs. And Joe Mixon, if nothing else, the compiler sees a lot of screens. That could be a way to attack. I do think, though, the Bengals get T. Higgins back. Jake Browning, I'll say this. He did run the offense in the preseason because Burrow was dealing with that calf. So at least he has reps with Chase and Higgins. So I think there'll be a lot of possession routes that he can get to his 2 elite receivers. I don't know how much it translates into. How do you see the Bengals functioning on offense in this game, Anthony?
It could be a long night for the Bengals. This Jacksonville defense, you can throw on them, but their pass rush and their run defense is to me is very, very underrated. And if they get pressure on Browning and they shut down Joe Mixon, I think it's going to be a long night. Like, yeah, okay, Jamar Chase still usable in fantasy. He can bring that floor. Depending on who it was, like I was benching Jamar Chase in some situations. Like I started, and I actually started myself in a couple of spots, Devin Singletary over Swift and Mixon, and actually Singletary over Swift, he 1 more point. Only, I think it was like 5-4, and I just don't see it for Joe Mixon. he's going to be extremely target reliant to bring fantasy production. He got that 5 targets against Baltimore, caught 5 for 31 and a touchdown, 16 for 69. And that was 2 weeks ago against Baltimore. Last week against Pittsburgh, I thought he was going to be a lot more involved. And he only got 8 for 16 on the ground and only 2 for 44 as a receiver, only 2 targets. What are we going to do with that? And now Jacksonville, to me, is a much better defense than Pittsburgh this year.
Now, we started the segment off talking about the recent, what I believe is Doug Peterson stepping in a bit, maybe not taking everything over, but his influence there on this offense now. Now, defensively, look, we talk up Lou Anarumo all the time, and early in the season, he dialed up a real nice one on a Monday night against the Rams, maybe week 3-ish, but this defense doesn't have a chance right now. The interior run defenders, who have been great for a couple of years, they've fallen off. Pass rush Trey Hendrickson, since he injured his knee, hasn't quite brought the same pressure. The corners, they lose Cam Taylor-Britt for this game. He sprained his ankle in Friday practice. Chidobe Awuzie, coming off an ACL, is not having a good season. The turnover at safety has been horrific for them. So tight ends are completely gutting them. And overall, this is a bad defense across the board. What do you see happening with the Jaguars offense in this matchup?
There are 2 players, Evan Ingram. He's had like 7-8 targets in all, but I think 2 games this year. He's yet to score a touchdown. I think he gets in tonight. I think this is going to be a big Evan Ingram game, and this could also be a game where Travis Etienne gets back on track. This could be one of those situations where Jacksonville might be able to do what they want to do, but I think getting Etienne back going and getting Evan Ingram into the end zone and trying to build for a playoff run, that's how I would attack this. Like, Ridley's been hot, but let's get Christian Kirk. I think they could kind of do what they want to do, and they're going to attack the weaknesses of this defense tonight.
Absolutely. Now, before we get to the betting, our idea says, Chad, I want to bring up Chad's point. Chad's talking about a little betting here. He's heard the talking up of Chase Brown's increased usage. That has been a thing. He's heard so much that he spent 20 units on his anytime TD when it was at full odds.
Wow.
But it doesn't matter how many touches he gets with Browning at quarterback. How much work could we see from Chase Brown?
If you look, like, Mixon has dominated running back snaps this year. Obviously, I believe like Brown's been a little bit banged up, hasn't played at all. So yeah, maybe they throw him in there. It all depends on if they see their season truly being done. NFL teams and coaches never want to count themselves out, but you need to see what you have for the future, right? Like Travion Williams isn't it. I don't think Chris Evans is it. Maybe Brown is. The only way we're going to know is if they give him some decent run down the stretch. Because Mixon, I believe, is on a contract year again.
Yeah, well, they should let him happy trails. And I don't know where else he goes after that, because he's been a compiler for a couple of years now. If he gets more than he probably gets the last year Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette treatment. I just don't see any team investing in him. To me, he's no longer useful. Now, betting on this game, Anthony, I want to talk about some props. And you kind of covered these in the way we covered this. I like 4. If you're building a same game parlay, there's 4 props I like. You already mentioned Travis Etienne over the rushing yards. I don't like that he's down to 60% snaps from 80, but it's the new reality. But like you said, this defense is bad, and he gets enough carries. He's going to pop one long one. Love Evan Ingram like you do over receiving yards. Joe Mixon over receiving yards. This is a defense that gives them I believe, they give them a ton of production to receiving backs. I want to say bottom of the league. And Mixon, like you said, he gets targets, and that's going to be an outlet when the pass rush does get going. The last one I like, Jamar Chase over 5.5 receptions. Do you see Chase going over 5.5, or do you see that being a dicey one?
That's going to be close. I think that can potentially get hooked. Like he gets 5. That I don't know if I would include you, but I can see why, because this Jaguar secondary, if you can get to them, it is that secondary, you attack it. That's how you beat Jacksonville. But again, do we trust Browning?
Right. And I just think it's a lot of short stuff. See, the way I'm going with that, it's not going to be down. We're not bomb away in the chase anymore. Those days are done, right? I'm thinking they're going to trail in this game. And if they trail, Browning's got to throw it about 40 plus times. And if they're short passes, but like you said, that's the toughest one. But Mixon over the 19.5 receiving yards, are you okay on that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Ingram, obviously, you're with me on the over there. How about ETN and the Russians? You already said that, right? You already said ETN?
I love ETN, and I like ETN to score as well.
Oh, the ETN to score. Now, another
a little bit of a drought, but his odds are minus 145. If you want to, if you parlay ETN touchdown and Jacksonville money line, it brings it down to minus 115, which is a lot more playable.
Now, in terms of the same game parlay, I love the Jaguars over their team total. You can move that number around. I like putting it at 23.5 in case they just hit 24, because I do believe the changes with Doug Peterson, which, and again, my narrative, I believe that's happened. I can't quantify, I can't prove it, but I like them over this total. Anything on that?
No, that's actually a smart idea. I actually like that play.
Now, to bet the game itself, Jaguars, it opened at 8.5. The line is 10 now. I don't like 10 because you could see this weird backdoor cover happening. It's a big number. Now, the Jaguars should be significantly better, but we've seen over the course of the season, they don't always finish teams off. What are your thoughts on the line in this game?
A little. It's right now at FanDuel, it's down to 9.5. I don't know how much I love that line. No. I think it's a lot. And this might be a situation. I know you like the teasers. We do a lot of teasers on this show. Mm-hmm. This might be one where we tease the total and the spread to make it a little bit more playable.
And if you're going to tease this one, you could do up, like normally it's a 6-point teaser. On DraftKings, you can go to 7. You lose your odds, but I'd be much more comfortable with 3 instead of 4. 4 is a key number. If 3, at least if it pushes, you get your money back. And so if you're going to push now, so if we're going to tease this one with down to 3, the over-under number is 40 on this. So do you go under 47 or over 33? And I'm leaning over 33.
That's close. I was actually thinking over 33.
Because I have the Jaguars going over their team total of 23.5.
Do we think Cincinnati can score enough to get there? That's my thing here.
Oh man,
that's the part that worries me.
Oh my god! So you could see Cincinnati not scoring 10 points here.
With the way this weekend has been, I mean, we saw New England, we saw the Chargers, we've seen a lot of low point totals this week, and this season overall. So that does worry me a little. I mean, Pittsburgh couldn't get out of their own way either.
Oh my god, Pittsburgh. You know what?
Like, I feel like when we see a couple of that scares me a little bit.
Anthony, I was on a gambling show, and I know we got to get out of here. I was on a gambling show with Adam Thompson this weekend from Bookies, and he talked about the Steelers covering over the Cardinals. And I said, do we think about the concept over many, many years when the Steelers play an inferior opponent, they spit the bit frequently. And I saw that, and I'm like, I would not trust Pittsburgh to beat an inferior opponent by 6 points, and they got their tushes kicked. Anything on this Pittsburgh not showing up for games against lesser teams?
It's nothing new, and that was actually a good trend you pointed out. But like, I didn't think the Cardinals had. I mean, it was like a 10-6 game going at halftime. They had a delay. It was like I think it was delayed
2 delays
twice, and then James Conner all of a sudden, just a revenge game, 2 touchdowns, 100 yards. This Cardinals team, if you say anything good about, they're very gritty, and they play for Gannon. I know, Gannon took a lot of heat in the offseason for the way he tried to motivate the team. I think the Cardinals, if they use these draft picks right, could be a very good team again.
And finally, Chad points out that Joe Mixon will be the next Vikings running back. So they would get similar production from Alexander Madison to Joe Mixon, but they get a far worse attitude. And final words on that?
I don't know what's going to happen with Joe Mixon. I'm kind of with you because his off the field, the Bengals seem willing to deal with it. I don't know if a lot of other teams are, because every offseason is something.
Yes, and every year you get older, you get worse, and I call it the sliding scale of the BS factor. We will put up with this much bullshit if you have this much production, but if your production goes down here, we have no Colin Kaepernick. Look, there was a point where the teams felt what he brought on the outside was more than he brought on the inside. Therefore, he didn't get a job. I don't think it had anything to do with the specific stances he had.
Yep.
I believe it was just that sliding scale. If he's not going to bring us elite production, we can't deal with that level of distraction.
Yeah.
All right, Anthony, I'm sorry. I kept you a long time today, but man, I could talk football all day long with you, and I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Anthony, tell everybody where they can find you and your great work.
You can follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru and over at Face Off Sports Network, FF Face Off. And then, of course, during the day here at RotoWire and every Monday with Jim.
All right, so for Anthony Cervino, I'm Jim Coventry. Enjoy the Monday night game, and hopefully the Bengals score a couple points for you. And if you gamble, get a winner in there. All right, we'll talk to everybody soon.